Hi, everyone. Welcome to the debate project presented by No Weapon Productions. Today, once again, we have Karima and Zora, who will be our two debaters. And today we have someone in our audience. Chiquita is joining us, watching from Virginia. Karima's from California, and Zora is from Washington, D.C. Today, they are debating the topic of whether or not marriage should still be valued. Arguing in the affirmative, we have Karima, and arguing against, we have Zora. So, Karima, are you ready to argue your point that marriage should still be valued?
Yes, I am.
All righty. Well, then I will have you go ahead and begin.
Okay, so first and foremost, no human should be alone. We don't even have the capacity to not have human interaction. I mean, I'm sure that all of us are experiencing this while we're in quarantine and social distancing, or we're having a really hard time not being around our friends and our family. Like, we're not built to be alone. And companionship is so important, if that's your prerogative. In the Bible, I know some people don't believe in this. I personally don't really, but it does state that it is not good for a man to be alone. And in that case, it shouldn't be for a woman either. And woman was built for man according to the Bible. And, a man can't survive without someone else, and neither can a woman. And that's just how it is. Um, in virtually every way that social scientists can measure, married people do much better than unmarried or divorced people. They live longer, they live healthier, they're happier, they feel sexier, and they live more affluent lives in some cases. And that is according to a City Journal article. In some cases, marriage can increase sexual fidelity. Some people just can't keep it in their pants, and that's them. But in a big retrospect, taking opinions and sides, that's what it is. The essence of marriage is such a selfless um, act. When you vow your life to someone else, and I want to love you, I want to make sure that you're good in sickness and health, rich or poor. Like, you take those vows, and that's that. Like, you have to keep that together. And if you have that personal feeling that you need to do it, then do it. There are people that just want a lifelong partner, but no legally binding anything. And if we're done, then we're done, and we move out and we say bye, and that's it. There's always those cases, and it's just so beautiful to me in such a self-centered society, and everyone's so selfish and they want me, and people are choosing someone else to live their life with and potentially start a family with, and combine their two families and create a bigger, happier family. It's honestly such a beautiful and selfless act to do so. Some people don't like their in-laws, some people don't, appreciate that. They don't like having a new family, but they like the person, and that can be a problem. But it's really just up to if you're selfish or you're not selfish. It's just your personal standing, and everything honestly comes down to how you feel as a person. There's not really a law that's like, well, if you're dating someone, and why don't you go further if you've been together for 5 years, but it's just up to that person. There's celebrities that have never gotten married, but they live together, they have children, and they don't plan on ever breaking up, but they didn't get married, they don't plan on ever doing it, and that's what worked for them, and that's what works. In this other article, by AC Peds, it's like a pediatric society. It says a father and a mother who are committed to each other could build a strong unit for the good of their children and enhancement of society, or a father and a father, or a mother and a mother. As long as, when people are married, usually it comes down to, a child can see that commitment within the two people, and see the love, and that, you know, can affect them down the line or not down the line. And just seeing the love and the passion between those two people, their parents, that can increase a child's ability to love someone else. And that's always good for society later on, you know, having really good, kind people. Um, but marriage is really just a personal choice, and it should be valued, but you know, it's unfortunate that it's not as much anymore in comparison to the 50s and 60s and 70s, where it was, you know, almost a requirement to get married, or, you know, it was very looked down upon if you weren't. Um, but yeah, that's my argument.
Okay, thank you, Karima. I'll have some questions for you in just a moment. Zora, are you prepared to make your argument that marriage should no longer be valued?
Yes.
Okay.
Alrighty. So I think there are a lot of factors that go into play here. The one, I would say financing, without a doubt. A lot of the people who are at the age where they want to get married or don't want to get married for that matter have to take in account the fact that the world is going through a huge inflation when it comes to education, when it comes to homes, how they cost 300,000 and upward, 200,000 and upwards for education, things like that. It's a crippling idea for a married couple who would want to get married out of college or who wants to buy a home together when you can barely like afford anything, you know, above your pay grade. And for a lot of millennials, they make between 30 and 40,000 a year still. And some millennials are like 40 years old this year, and they're still making like McDonald's employee money, you know? So it's like, why would you think about, you know, getting married right now when you can barely afford to like Uber? I think a lot of it also has to do with like moving with the world. I think now with our generation and with millennials too, in terms of like the internet and social media, we are been introduced to a lot of like new lifestyles. And I think that a lot of people have moved even to like polyamory, which is like multiple people, like an open relationship basically. And it's definitely like a lot more popular now, which is interesting because when you think about the baby boomers and like the generations, but especially the baby boomers, like a lot of the women during then were forced kind of to marry a man because the man would go off to war. And I was like, okay, so I want to get married, so let's get married. And that's why there was the baby boom, because all these people was getting married and having kids. I think nowadays, I think everything is still high in terms of politics and social, economic, and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's the polar opposite where it's like, okay, things are too expensive. People are dying. We have coronavirus. I'm not going to bring a child into this world, and I don't think I want to get married. So, you know, let me just fend on my own for a little bit. Let's see. Also, I know that a lot of people say that tax breaks is like a really good reason to get married for like the, you know, the money reasons and stuff. However, it is evident according to Medium that two high income earners wouldn't be benefited from tax breaks, two low income earners wouldn't be benefited, and most dual income owners with children wouldn't be benefited. So that reasoning is a little flawed, especially now, than it has been ever before. I know a lot of people also say that two-parent households are like the greatest for children, and that getting married and having a kid, that's the perfect way to raise a child. It According to Medium, again, evidence does indicate that school achievement and behavioral problems are similar among children living with both biological parents, regardless of marital status. So it's evident that a couple doesn't really need to get married in order to, like, you know, have a kid that's raised right, you know, whatever that means. I think my last final point has to do with social acceptance and class privilege. A lot of the reasoning for getting married in the past has been for social acceptance, for showing, oh yeah, like I've done this, I can get married at this age, I can live the American dream, I can do this, I can do that. And I think a lot of that has kind of changed to being a place from social acceptance to being just primarily privilege. And you really have to think about like same-sex marriages, like everybody, you know, everybody that's involved in the loop. There are people who are in love with each other who cannot get married in some places. And I think that marriage shouldn't be valued until everybody is able to get married, you know? So I think it shouldn't be pick and choose until everyone has the same rights. So essentially, marriage has kind of moved from being like a social acceptance thing to just being like a thing you can do, or if you have the money to afford a full wedding and all that, it's kind of a privilege. So I think until it's, looked at as something that everyone can do, I don't think that it should be valued.
Thank you, Zora. So you each have 5 minutes to rebut the other person's point. Karima, do you have anything that you'd like to share in rebuttal?
I do, yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so as to what Zora was saying about the privilege of having a wedding, or even being able to have people that are in same-sex relationships get married, it is so disrespectful that people cannot just love who they love and have a legally binding contract that supports them. It's so unfortunate, and it makes me so angry, knowing that my friends and some of my family can't marry each other just because they have the same genitalia. It's so dumb and it's so unfortunate. But it comes down to who you are. If that's what you support and you have the ability to do that in some countries, by all means, if you value it as a person, then get married. If you don't value it, then don't. Another thing that I've been noticing recently with young people that have a little more money, they're spending all this money on a wedding, and people are waiting during quarantine and coronavirus to get married. And, the Christians are like, we want a wedding. And I'm like, but do you want a wedding or do you want marriage? There's two very different things, and people don't, they associate them with each other, but they're not the same. You're getting wed in front of people, that and you love, and you want them to see you get married. But, is it really, about, I want to impress my friends with how much money I can spend on flowers and a dress and how many people and the venue and the whatnot? Or is it, I love this person wholeheartedly and I can't imagine another day without them, even if you already live together? You can't imagine a day where they're gone. Like, if that's someone's view, then totally get married. I mean, that's how I feel. If I love someone wholeheartedly, I'd elope in 2 seconds. Like, right after we get engaged, I'm like, let's go to the courthouse and let's figure it out, and we can figure out all the formalities later. But it's really up to the person. Marriage is marriage, love is love, and everyone should be able to do that. And it's so unfortunate that people can't. But in some cases where you can, by all means, do it. Do it as fast as you can before sometimes legislation could take it away. So yeah, that's my rebuttal.
Or do you have any additional things you would like to add in rebuttal as well?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that point, Karima. I think that marriage, if somebody wants to get married, that they should wholeheartedly go ahead and like sign them papers, go to the courthouse, period. But I think that marriage as a whole shouldn't be like a huge factor in like what someone is granted in life that we live, especially the fact that some people literally can't get married. It's like crazy. And I think that same feeling, like the being in love and like all of that kind of stuff, it's a shame that like so many people don't have that opportunity to get married, or like they just don't want to, or things like that. So I think in addition to just not being able to, I think a lot of people just in this day and age don't really want it. Like they like, if they're in love with one person, it's like, okay, period. Like, I'm in love with you. Let's just live until we die. And that's it. Like, we don't have to put any, contract between us or anything. It's just what it is. And more power to them, but also more power to the people who want to get married, who want that wedding, who want like the whole ordeal, who want that, like me personally, I low-key want that. But like, I don't think that it's something that everyone has to do, because everyone is built so differently. So,
Thank you both. Thank you both. I have a few follow-up questions. So my first question is, your arguments actually seem very similar. So it didn't really feel as much pro and con. Were you arguing a point that you didn't agree with?
No, I was arguing
Um,
what I believe.
yes and no for me. Like, because it was kind of a, like, I don't know, the question, I was like, should marriage still be valued? I think that marriage shouldn't like determine if somebody has access to something or not. But I also believe that it should be valued for those that want to value it, if that makes sense. Like, it's kind of yes and no. It's like weird. I don't know.
And Karima, Zora shared that she does want to get married someday. Do you want to get married someday, or would you be happy just being in a relationship?
If my spouse or my future partner is cool with the let's sign a paper and let's go, then sure. If they're not, then it is what it is. But, I plan to have, one sole partner for, when I meet them for the rest of my life. I plan to be with them regardless of a marital contract. It's always, I love the stories of, we eloped and we didn't tell anybody, and then we came back and we're like, guess what, we're married. And it's just like the cutest thing. um and I've always, thought about that and seen, the pure joy and happiness of just being with each other and being able to have that contract that ties them. And in some cases, a lot of people really, really like that. And just to have the ability to, have that paper and be like, we're together, so what about it? There's people that we're not allowed to get married, like gay people, and even Black and white people way back when, the loving couple, they got married in a state where it was okay, and then they went back to where they lived and it wasn't okay, and they went to jail and they had to face all this hardship, but it was their love that kept them together. And even though that contract didn't mean anything in the state that they were in, it meant something to them, and that's what really, really matters, I think.
Do you you talked about the legally binding contract. So if you were in love and your potential life mate said, I love you, but I will never marry you. I don't believe in the contract. You just take my word for it. I want to be with you, and that should be enough. Would that be enough for you? I'll ask Zora first and then Karima.
Okay, I think if I was with somebody who said it exactly like that, I would have to break up with them, just because like like it's very like, it just sounds like, yeah, you're not marriage material, but like, I'll stick with you. It's like, granted, marriage material, should it be valued or not? It depends on the person. But I think in that scenario, I would likely pass, just because it sounds kind of iffy almost. Just knowing like the social like place where we all kind of stand in general. I think that, granted, although some people don't get married, I think that if someone straight up was like, yeah, like, I don't think, I will never marry you. Like, it's like, oh, wow. Okay.
Karima, what about you?
I feel the same way. If someone said it to me in that connotation, I'd be like, wait a minute, you can go somewhere else. You can find someone else that's not marriage material. But if they're like, I want to be with you, but I just don't like the idea of legally being binded together, then sure. If I love that person more than my heart's content, then I'm like, you know what? If that's your deal, then that's your deal. We don't have to have joint anything. We can just live our separate lives. But at the end of the day, like, you're my partner, and that's that. If someone doesn't want a legally binding contract, then they don't have to have one. But if someone says to me like that, we gonna have to figure out something else.
Chiquita, do you have any questions for our debaters? Oh, I might need to unmute you. There.
I thought of something a minute ago and it left when you started that part of the conversation. That was very fascinating. But it was a great debate, and I enjoyed hearing both sides of the argument.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I have one final question. One for Zora and one for Karima. So Zora, my question to you, at one point you mentioned that the financial repercussions or ramifications for marriage were off-putting. Weddings are expensive, marriages can be expensive, there's not necessarily a tax break, all of those things. But then there's the opposite view of that, which is if we pool our resources, we can do more. Do you really think that financially marriage is detrimental, or do you think it can be helpful financially?
Interesting. I think that I think it's very case by case, similar to, the other debate. I think this one's very case by case. With some families, like some families that I know personally, their parents are just going to pay for their whole wedding, and it's like, oh, period, like it's so cute, and like the whole 9 yards. And just from my previous experience, because I did work in the wedding industry, a lot of the families that are able to afford those weddings look the same, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. So like it's interesting. Like a lot of the people who are primarily able to afford those kind of weddings are like the Jewish, like they have money, they have a bunch of saved up money that their parents just throw or their grandparents just throw at them, and they can just do what they will with that. But with some other families, they have to like switch to either having like a very small wedding or like going to the courthouse and like, just signing the contract or things like that. So I think it really depends. I think with people that I know personally, I would say that it would be detrimental to do like the full wedding just at this point in our lives, to do a full, like huge, crazy, like, awesome wedding. But with other people who may have like, more of like a privileged, more kind of rich place that they come from or things like that, or have grandparents who are super wealthy, I think that it's like, just go ahead, just do what you got to do,
But that's the wedding. And yes, I agree that that's the wedding. But do you think it is detrimental to the marriage?
I think that, in my personal opinion, I don't really think it has any effect on it, if that makes sense. I think that it really just depends on the married couple and what they do in terms of like careers and things like that. Because there's so many different like financial situations with each couple where I'm like, it could be detrimental for one and like super beneficial for another. Like even just being a musician, like working in the music industry, it's like kind of beneficial if you have one partner that's a musician and then you have one that does like something part-time or full-time, because then it's kind of like a balancing of finances, from like, touring artist and then like this full-time worker or something like that. It can be a balance. But then if you have somebody where they both kind of work in like low-income jobs or something like that, it can be kind of detrimental, because it's like we have to fund ourselves and we have to fund each other. So it's like, okay, it's just a lot going on. So I don't know.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And then in terms of, Karima, in terms of children, do you think that it impacts children? I know that there were some statistics given from Zora in terms of how they do, but from an emotional standpoint, do you think that children benefit from having two parents married in the home together?
I think a two-parent household is pretty important. I didn't grow up in one, and as a child, I used to compare myself to my friends that I went to school with that had two parents, and it seemed as if the grass was greener on the other side. But as an adult now, my mom did everything that I could ever possibly imagine, in the world to make sure that I'm okay and that I'm good. And at the end of the day, I didn't need a dad, but some children have that need to have a two-parent household to be stable, and they don't have the emotional capacity to be strong enough to handle just one parent. And in some cases only one parent does the one parent job, and they don't take over the two, and they don't double up the support, and they don't go out of their way for that kid. And in that case, I think it could be detrimental to a child. But a one-parent home is not a problem. It doesn't just take two people to raise a kid. That's what your family's for. It's a village. There's family, friends, and family, and it's not just two people. So even though there could be only one parent, there's so many other people that are helping to make sure that kid is good. And can you take them? Because I need to have a break. People aren't made to be parents 24/7. So in those cases, it goes case by case. I mean, everything is just person by person emotional capacity, you know, based on the parents versus the child. And, you know, two-parent households can be beneficial, but at the same time, there can be cases where a two-parent household isn't as beneficial if it was just the mom or just the dad. So it works out.
Okay, thank you for sharing your views, both of you. And both of you during the recent debate, this debate and a recent debate, have shared several times that it's case by case and it's individual by individual. I would love to have you both back on another day to debate that individuality versus, you know, what should be determined on an individual basis and what should be legislated, because you both have really strong views about that. And I like what you were saying in terms of case by case. You're talking about personal morality and things like that. And I'd love to hear your views on what should be individual, you know, based on an individual's decision, and what should be legislated. So would you both be willing to come back and debate in the future?
Yes, absolutely. I love
Yeah.
doing these. They're so fun. And it's nice to hear someone else's perspective on something. You know, if I'm not super close-minded, but in some cases, you know, I might not know something, and it's really nice to be educated and know something else that I didn't know.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being with us. And thank you, Chiquita, also for being with us on today's debate. Did you have any final comments before I end the recording?
No, thank you for having me. It was great to join and to watch the debate go on and to hear the views of the people who participated.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.